Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to the Plat. Purplatypus the name, and today we are doing a tier list of Honkai Star Rail. I'm going to go through every character that's in the game. There's a few caveats. We'll get to those when we get to those. But we're just going to go in order here, and things might change around. Holy crap, game. I have it on the background, so we have some sound. Let's put it down to a 5 for me. Anyway, let's just jump into it. Oh man, I feel bad starting this way. Things will move around as we go, because there's characters that have context. All right. So, Arlen, I'm sorry to start. D tier, potentially the worst character in the game. I think, probably. I think they are probably the worst character in the game, honestly. We're not going to go too deep into characters that I think are a little self-explanatory, but in the case of Arlen, because they're the first, we'll kind of do it. What's going on here? I'll have to fix that in a minute. He's a damage dealer that kills himself and doesn't deal that much damage in the process. Now, if you really need a lightning damage dealer for something, he is probably the best that we have right now, for single target lightning damage. However, enemies have multiple weaknesses nearly all the time. So instead of bringing a single target lightning damager, you'll find a different element that they're weak against, and you'll use that instead. I think Arlen is just pretty bad, but he's a cool character. Asta, I think Asta is a strong A tier character. Now, I think that she kind of has this hidden potential. One, she's really, really good at breaking shields. I think everyone kind of knows that. She just does pretty good damage. It's not great, but she does like okay damage, can apply burn. It gives everyone an attack buff, but she's really good at single target. It's toughness breaking, shield breaking. Now, toughness break effect does not increase the amount of toughness you deal. So that is one thing. It's hard to manipulate it to be extra high. It's break efficiency, not break effect. So when you get like plus 40% break effect, it doesn't make her break shields faster. It just means when she does break shields, it'll have a bigger impact. It'll knock them back in line further. It'll increase the damage over time that they take from the fire damage, that kind of stuff. But also, there's a lot of, once you get to the relics, there's like the 4 pieces of normal equipment, and then there's like the kind you get from the simulated world. They have a speed requirement to get a secondary passive active. My hair's in the way, I got the fan on. But it'll be like, once you get 120 or 145 speed, activate the secondary effect. Asta's ultimate increases speed. So on top of it being good to give your characters more turns than the enemy, because enemies keep getting faster as you go equilibrium levels up, this will also allow you to trigger these, especially in the early game, to make these effects actually active. Because it can be hard to hit 145 speed naturally on a 4-star, right? Like, even if you have purple boots that you're leveling up all the way, you're not hitting 145 or 140 on speed, unless it's like a really fast character with that and you have like really good gear. So as gear gets better, her ultimate with the speed increase I think will be less relevant, but it is still early in the game. I think it's very good shield breaker, makes your other characters stronger. Just honestly a solid A tier character in my opinion. We might move her down to B. We'll just because there might be a bigger power gap between some of these characters here. Bailu here, I think Bailu is borderline S tier because she's the best healer. The only thing keeping her from S tier, so I mean, she's insane, right? She does really powerful heals. Her attack she has a normal basic attack, but it'll help her refresh faster, right? It pushes her forward once you get into her skill tree. And then on top of that, she has a passive that, one, her technique is good. It keeps everyone healed. But like when someone dies, she'll revive them. So she's just like an insanely good healer. And even if someone gets bursted down, she has a uh-oh and revives them button. The only thing keeping her from S is she doesn't have a way to get rid of debuffs on your allies. If her heal got rid of debuffs or something, she would be easy S tier. I think once there's a healer that maybe doesn't heal quite as well and can't revive, but can remove debuffs, I think that might be a power creep on her. But as of now, she's easily the best healer, but I'm still going to put her high A tier for now. Bronya, first easy S tier character. Absolutely busted Great ult, great skill, and even her attack is great. So she has the ability, once you get her up a little bit, where her attacks are guaranteed crits. So you don't need to build any crit chance on her. You can build just crit damage and do pretty decent damage because her attacks are always going to be doing crits. But her ultimate increases the attack of all allies and crit damage based on a flat amount plus, like, it's like 15% or whatever crit damage plus 15% of her crit damage. So if you build a lot of crit damage on her, all your allies are going to be getting a huge attack buff and a huge crit damage buff. And she'll be doing a lot of extra damage too as well. But really why she's so good is her skill. All that stuff is really good, but her skill is really what sets her apart. It instantly allows any of your allies to take a turn directly after her, and it increases their attack. So she becomes basically a copy of any character you need. If you're in a situation where it's like, I need to break this character, but I can't do it unless, like, a boss is about to do a super move, they have an ice weakness. They're like, all right, my ice character didn't do enough to break it. I need to do this. Bronya is a second copy of your strongest ice character, essentially. Because they can absolutely, like, after your ice character goes, Bronya goes, because Bronya is usually slower than a lot of these characters. She can instantly make them move up so that they are ready to go again. And so you can get double actions on your most powerful characters. So the reason she's an easy S tier, like, all of her stuff is good, but the fact that she kind of doubles as the strongest unit as your, like, a second copy of your strongest unit. So absolutely, if you have Bronya, use her in almost every team comp. I don't use her in every team comp because sometimes I just get bored of using the same characters and I'll mix it up, but she's definitely one that should always be there. Now, there are 3 characters. There's 4 characters I don't have. Clara is one of them. I'm going to put Clara in the low A tier, but this is mostly out of ignorance. I could be like, oh, let's wait till I get all the characters and I can play with them all, but, like, come on. I have, out of the 22 characters or whatever, I have 18 of them I've used pretty extensively. And this is but from what I understand and what I could read from her, she seems really, really good. She doesn't seem like she's S tier broken because a lot of her stuff is based on having to get attacked and then counterattack. But I think this will be an incredibly powerful simulated universe character because counters count as follow-up attacks, and there's a whole follow-up attack tree that is pretty powerful, but it's not. There's not a lot of good characters that go with it. And because I don't have this character, I think that tree is a little underbaked, but I think she'll really make the simulated universe easier. Plus, it's one of the coolest characters because she has Svarog with her. We got our boy Dan here. Dan, let me think here. Let me look what's coming up and let me see what I think. I think Dan is actually also going to go into A tier. Probably the lowest of the A tiers, though. I think that he does one thing and he does it pretty well. He needs to be paired with someone that can slow. He can slow if he gets a crit. Like, he has to get a crit and then he has a chance to slow, but then his ultimate does, like, insane damage. It's like a really, really, really high percent. Like, I think it's higher. Like, if I logged into the game, we'll let that go. But I actually think his percentage is, like, straight up higher than Seely's, like, percent attack. Like, she has another thing where her trait goes on, and so she'll actually end up doing more damage probably. But I mean, he's, like, not far behind, and he's a 4-star that's easy to get all the dupes of. So he's a great character. He does kind of one thing, but he does do a lot of damage, a lot of single target damage. Because there are better single target damage dealers, I don't think he's, like, S tier good, but I do think he's a very good character to invest in because eventually you're going to need wind damage. And Bronya, although she's wind, doesn't really bring the damage in that way. But she can still do pretty good in that way. All right, so here's another one of the characters I don't have. There's actually 5 characters I don't have, I'm realizing now. I thought I didn't have 4, I don't have 5. But we'll get there. I'm going to put him down here in B tier. This is a shield generator guy. From what I understand and what I've seen, is he just is very defensive. He doesn't do that much damage. And he seems like good, but not great. But honestly, there's going to be a few characters. You know what? Characters that I don't have, let's just leave down here. And then I'll kind of maybe put them somewhere later. But I don't want to. You're right. I think it's silly to kind of think to put them up there. You're right. You're right. You convinced me. Hera is going into D tier. I do think she's better than Arlen. because she has an ability to do a bunch of damage out of nowhere if you're fighting a bunch of weak guys. Like if there's a big group, she could do a lot of damage to a group in general because of her follow-up attacks, and she has like, it's easy to get dupes of her because you get her from the simulated world. You get a lot of her, like I already got like 3 or 4 copies, I feel like, of her unique, or not unique, but her light cone, the one that makes follow-up attacks deal more damage if they're low on life. So she actually does end up doing quite a bit of damage, but I mean, she's still like kind of shit, like in my opinion. Like, it has to be a very, very specific right situation. Now, if you overinvest in her, you give her a really high attack, she can carry you through the game, but any character can carry you through the game. And I think she does it worse than most characters, but there is a little bit for auto farming, things like that. I think she has some viability. But I just think like once you, like, she was my favorite character and I used her in everything. And then as I started using other characters and I tried to go back to her, she just like, she hit like a wet noodle, honestly. The percentages are just too low. These are the 3 5-stars I don't have. And in fact, let's go ahead and get the 2 4-stars I don't have either. I don't have Sampo and I don't have her. Now, I will probably rank these characters because they're a little simpler than the 5-stars. The 5-stars are a little bit harder to rate in my opinion, but we'll get to those. Hook, I put Hook down at the D tier in my like video yesterday or 2 days ago. I have seen the error of my ways in the sense that everyone says that I'm wrong, and I've probably just utilized her wrong, but they say that she's currently ranked from the math like number 4 in single target DPS, and she's fire, so there's not really a whole lot of good options here. Yeah, there's Hemiko, and there's the fire Trailblazer, but the fire Trailblazer does not do much damage. It's kind of more of an AoE build and more defensive than anything. And from my understanding, Hemiko does, like, she's good, but she doesn't do as much single target damage. So even though it's a good character, I hear she kind of falls off. So Hook, I'm gonna put up in the B tier. I still don't think she's quite as good as Asta or some of these other characters, but my understanding is she's better than I've been giving her credit for, and I will use her more in the future. I think March 7th is a perfect B tier character. She's a character that I actually think is getting, when I started the game, I was like, oh, she's pretty good. And then in like the mid game, I was like, she's absolutely trash. And now I've come back around to her. I think she's just pretty good. Once you get a couple dupes of her and you get it so her counterattack can go off an extra time every turn and it scales off her defense, that's when she really starts to unlock. So shields are good. They just keep things alive. Her shield also has a pseudo taunt on it, so you could target it to hit something. So like in a sense where you pick something and it's very likely if you're using it on something with a lot of HP that enemies will start targeting that. So that's very good. So she gets a bunch of attacks every turn. She gets to protect things essentially, and also gets to protect other units she doesn't target by a pseudo taunting. She has the ability to freeze enemies with her ultimate. It's not consistent, but it is there, and you can kind of buff it with your relics to be better. She also does get the ability to heal, whatever she shields. But most importantly, above all, in my opinion, is that her shield also has the ability to get rid of a debuff. That is something that isn't super common. There are a few ways to do it, but I think hers is one of the better ways to do it. And it just, overall, March 7th has just been a very good, solid character. I don't think she's like irreplaceably good, where she's like, I don't think she's quite A tier, but I do think she's just like, she's a character you're going to want to develop at a point. Maybe not a top priority character, but definitely a character worth it. So Natasha's in kind of a weird spot for me because she does kind of have that thing I was talking about where she heals worse, but she can remove a debuff. The issue is she can only move 1 debuff from 1 ally. I think like you need some more like of an AoE debuff. Basically, like March 7th removes a debuff from an ally, right? And that's one of the things that I think makes her so good. But I think she brings a lot more to the table beyond that, especially being able to freeze characters. She really heals and then sometimes is going to be able to use the debuff, but even then, it's mostly just for healing. Now, I think this character, if you don't have a healer, like I think she is probably an A tier character because you kind of you don't always need it, but there's times you really want a healer on your team. I think she's probably just B tier though. I think I wouldn't quite put her in C tier, but I think she's kind of low B tier, and that's only, I'm a little biased because Bailu is probably one of the first characters I pulled. I think she might have been my first 5-star actually, and second 5-star. And so I've been using her almost the whole game. So Natasha hasn't felt particularly strong to me in comparison, which might be a bit of a bias here, but I think that she's okay. She does actually get a pretty reasonable, I think her physical attack gets stronger actually based on I know you guys can't see this, but don't worry, I can. I think her physical attack actually gets stronger based on something, right? Basic attack deals damage equal to her max HP. So she's actually a better damage dealer, probably, overall. But I still think she's probably just a B tier. Like, you don't need your healer usually to be a good damage dealer, even though it can be nice sometimes. She is physical, which there's not a lot of physical units. There's only 3. And so that kind of makes her pretty good here as well. But I still think B tier. Pella. I'm going to put her in C tier with a caveat. The caveat is that she could debuff a buff from an enemy. If an enemy has something you want to remove a buff from, I think she goes immediately up to S tier because there's like almost no one that's bringing that to the table. She's very unique in that regard. Her ultimate can lower defense. Sometimes her skill can remove debuffs, or rather remove buffs. But the thing is, she just doesn't do that much damage and she doesn't bring anything else to the table. Her ultimate's not that good. The ability to remove a buff is usually not good. However, once you get to the ship with the reborn guys, it is really fun to remove their reborn from them, and then they just die in the first hit. But I do think she's just kind of a lackluster unit right now, until you have a situation where you want her, and then she becomes incredibly good. I think low C tier, potentially D tier, is going to be our Mahjong player here. I did put her in one of the characters, like, don't overlook her, and I do think I thought she was better. I think her damage output is just not kept up with what I was expecting. It's mostly that I use a lot of teams that are skill point intensive. You have to build a team specifically around this character that you want to use normal attacks with, or you have a way of generating extra points with, because you want her to be able to use her skill. She could use her skill several times a turn and it doesn't end her turn, right? So that's something that is very hard to maintain. But when she can, if every turn you could always use your like 160% AoE, that's getting like, this like 4 buffs or 3 buffs from your skill, and then maybe a buff from your ultimate, then maybe some other characters. Like, she could do some good stuff, but you have to go like jump through all these hoops to make it actually work, when other characters are just better at doing it. However, as far as AoE attacks go, it is actually pretty good, but I still think it's like you go through a lot of hoops to kind of do something worse than what Serval's doing. But sometimes you need quantum damage, and when you do, she is there if you don't have. The next character in S is going to be our friend and our ally, Seelie. I think Seelie is pretty much as strong as everyone knows and thinks she is. She just does insane single target damage. She does slightly excel against weaker enemies. As enemies get stronger, her kit doesn't fall apart, but she becomes slightly less good, because when she kills something, she can get an extra turn and she gets a buff. So if you're fighting like something with low HP, you can kill that, go to something else, kill that, and then it only happens once. But like being able to kill something for essentially free with an attack, to then get buffed, to be able to use your skill on something else to deal damage, is really good. But even when there's one big enemy, right, being able to like use your thing to increase your speed so you're going consistently, then use your ultimate, which is a lot of damage, do a big hits. Like, she's still good at killing shit, single target, but it's just slightly less good. She's slightly better when there's something she can kill and get the benefit of using her ultimate on, because otherwise the talent doesn't really do that much. You get the buff state less as well. But overall, just like an insane damage dealer, right? Like, she's probably number 1 in the entire game. Probably. She's not number 1 on my account because she's not as built yet as some of my other characters, but she just is absolutely nuts. Definitely a character that if you should be building to the fullest, but anyone that has this character is building her because she is the first banner in the game, and that means you've either spent money or you put your resources in and you got her. So if you got her, you want to use her. Everyone knows that. Serval. I think Serval is a low B tier here. Maybe she's going to be a high B tier, actually. I don't think she's quite A yet. I think her damage is a little bit lacking. I think if you have something like you have Hook, you have Serval, you have Sampo, like you kind of have this whole damage over time team, that she starts looking better. However, because I don't have Sampo and I don't get to increase this damage over time stuff, I have felt her damage is just like a little bit weak. And I found AoE in general to be not as good so far with the content in the game. Typically, when you're fighting a lot of enemies, they're all weaker. And when they're all weaker, usually my single target guys can just kill them pretty fast. And I haven't been like, I want to do a little bit of damage to everybody. Now, it is a way to get more total damage on the encounter usually, but I just haven't found the encounters to really need it that bad yet. But I still think she's B tier, right? She does good damage. She's good at breaking a bunch of characters at the same time. She's good at getting damage over time on them, and her ultimate's pretty good. Overall, I've got really nothing negative to say about her. I think she's just not quite the A tier yet. I think she's, I'm gonna put her, I'm gonna put it like this. It's from top to bottom, left to right, in my opinion. I think Bronya is probably better than, I think this one's tough for me. I don't know. Anyway, continuing on. Now, this character is our, I don't remember how to say her name. It's Sushang, I think. She is our next physical damage dealer. We have 3 physical units, I think, in the game. We have Trailblazer, Sushang, and Natasha, or Natalie. I think it's Natasha. I think she's kind of bad, if I'm being honest. I think she's like a high C tier. Now, this comes with a caveat where she does a really, really good amount of damage, but so much of her kit is based around an enemy being broken. So again, she's kind of another character that standalone doesn't do that good. She doesn't break shields that well. But once shields are broken, her whole kit comes online. She gets a big speed buff. It's like 16%, but it'll scale up. So she gets a speed buff. Her ultimate, you know, lets her go again immediately, so she can immediately take advantage of it. And then her skill will hit like 4 or 5 extra times or something. Like, her skill hits, and then it does a bunch of extra hits for damage, but only against broken foes 100% of the time. So I think it's like she has a lot of damage, but I think the window of opportunity for her to use that damage is pretty small. So you have to use her in a very specific right way, which I think she is good. Maybe she does deserve to go up to the B tier. But I just think, like, there's better, again, like, I don't want everything to be like, well, she's not as good as this other damage dealer, but I feel like you have to kind of, again, jump through some hoops. So you want someone to break an enemy, and then in response to that break, you want her to use her ult. That way she gets to immediately go, and she gets the speed boost, then you can attack with it, and then hopefully she gets another round before the broken enemy gets to go. Because once they're broken, she's doing a lot of damage, but again, she's kind of playing with this, like, little window thing. And because we all have Trailblazer as a physical damage dealer, and everyone kind of builds them because, or him or her, because there's like a, you know, it's just a character you get. It's called they call it a 5-star. They have kind of their own resource for ascending at a point. Like, I don't feel the need for the physical, so I am going to put her in high C myself, which is also a great beverage. Trailblazer, physical. This is going to be the spiciest take of all. All right, these last 3 might be a little too spicy. All right. And I might be wrong. I'm not perfect, all right? But here's the thing. I think Trailblazer physical is actually probably worse than Sushang. And I say that knowing full well that everybody uses this character and it's built on probably everyone's account. The thing is, I think perceptions, I think because you kind of have to use this character in a sense, and it's like, this character for me always has some of my best relics. They always are one of the highest levels, or always one of the highest ascended. They have good light cones because there's not that many destruction characters that I'm using. So it's like they have all this stuff, so they're really built, and I think that makes them appear stronger. Their ultimate is good. The Trailblazer ultimate is good. It has a really high percentage, and the AoE is good. The single target is good. But outside of that, the normal attacks don't really do anything. And the AoE is like, even now at level 60, it's like 80% or 82% at like level 4 or 5. Like, that's not very good AoE. It's like, okay, the shield breaking potential is okay, but a lot of times when you want to hit, there's one enemy and you're hitting them with either like a 50 to 60% normal attack or an 80% skill. It's like you're really getting low value for your skill points there. I think because they have the versatility of some single targets, some AoE with a really good ultimate that kind of helps bridge the gap of the dealing the damage, I think the Trailblazer seems pretty good. But I actually think physical Trailblazer is a C tier unit, if I'm being completely honest. Even though it carried me through the game, I think that's due to more heavily invested than anything. I'm going to use the other Trailblazer here as the Fire Trailblazer. I think Fire Trailblazer is A. I think they're just kind of, just good. They just don't fucking die, man. They get a lot of defense and they keep shields on everybody and they do some decent AoE damage. They can keep your other people safe from taunting and they give shield to everybody. They taunt the enemy. They're really hard to kill because you're building defense. And like, I'll just like, if you have shields on them, like I'll see other characters get it for like 200. They'll get it for like 15, you know, just like nothing. They just absorb damage like a champ. They don't do that much damage, but between the ultimate and the enhanced attack, you could do some pretty good AoE. That's not your goal, is not a damage dealer here. Your preservation. You're really good at keeping characters alive. Definitely better than March 7th at keeping characters alive. March 7th brings more utility by being able to freeze people, things like that, and remove debuffs. You're better at actually preserving the team, and I think this is probably the best non-healing. I mean, I'm sure this character is just better, right? But I don't have this character, so I'm going to keep them off the list for now. I mean, I might just put that character up in like high A tier, but I think Fire Trailblazer is a very, very good character. Definitely better than physical Trailblazer. I still tend to use physical, but that's mostly just because I like having a physical DPS that I've already invested a lot into, you know? Because in the early stages of the game, it's your main character. I'm going to invest into it. That's just kind of fun. Welt, I don't think this one's going to be too spicy. It depends on what you think, but I think Welt is just below S tier, potentially S tier. If there's like an A+ tier, I think he goes right here. I think that he's the only imaginary damage unit in the game that I'm aware of, actually. I don't think there's another one. He kind of is. I think he's S tier, man. I think I'm thinking out loud to myself, and I'm already thinking that I think he's just S tier. Maybe the bottom of S tier, though. But the ability to imprison things, he's great at breaking shields. He kind of has the Asta thing. Not quite as good at breaking shields as Asta, but he has the added benefit of applying slowdown. His damage is actually great. Is because he has this talent that if enemies are slowed, it deals extra damage. He actually has a good auto attack in addition, because if you slow an enemy with your skill first, he also then his normal attack will get a pretty big damage boost. He has the fucking sickest ult. The ult just like it'll apply vulnerability, it'll delay their turns, it'll entanglement. It's a great control thing. The only thing that like he doesn't have going for him is that his damage isn't insane, but it is good. He kind of has the Asta thing where if there's like 5 enemies or like 3 enemies and you want to use a skill to like break shields, you only can guarantee the first hit or something, and it'll just kind of, his attacks will kind of go around. So he could be a little RNG in a fight with a lot of enemies, but as the fight narrows down to less enemies, he becomes better and better and better. And when there's one target, he's really good at keeping them slow for the whole fight and keeping them entangled and keeping them this and that. And then his damage does become better because once the skill is hitting the same thing 3-4 times, whatever it is, becomes really good. Also, he's particularly good with Dan here because because this guy does more damage when you apply slow. This guy applies slow way better, way more consistently. So these two work pretty well together. Plus, great single target, so they kill stuff together pretty fast. And then finally, actually the last character, because these characters aren't in the game. These characters are not in the game yet, and I'm not going to judge characters that aren't in the game. We have... I don't remember how to say his name. And this is going to be funny because I'm about to place him. What's his name? Yan King. All right, I apologize. Yan King. If I said it wrong, I apologize. I am a dumb American. He is, in my opinion, easily the best character in the game. Yes, I said it. I think he's better than Sealy. I think he's better than everybody. His damage is freaking nuts. It's maybe not quite as good as Sealy here. I think she probably has him slightly beat in single target damage. And she's good at cleaning up trash a bit better than him. But he has a I think he can actually hit higher damage numbers relatively easy, especially with low relic investment, because he has such a high passive critical hit rate. You don't need to get like a 80% crit rate on him with your things before you get 100%. He has like a passive like 60% buff plus like another whatever percent buff. I actually don't remember the exact numbers here, but he gets a 60% from his skill. From the talent. You get a crit rate by 70% with his talent. And then when you use his ultimate, you get an extra 60%. So he gets like this huge crit hit chance, which is just powerful already. So you can focus mostly on critical damage. And critical damage is already good with Bronya, because Bronya is already kind of a critical damage unit and buffs everyone's attack and critical damage. So he's already good at doing all that. So I think he actually has in a lower quality relic meta kind of thing where you're still building characters. I think he has an advantage. But also, he just freezes things like crazy. His freeze is so powerful and consistent because his speed is usually pretty high because he's a hunt unit. And, you know, you're probably applying slow. You might be using Bronya with him to get him to go again and again. And so you're just using your skill, dealing a shit ton of damage, frequently freezing enemies so they delay their turn. You get Bronya, you have him go again. You have him freeze the enemy unfreezes, he gets to go again and freeze. I've just like permanently locked characters in the game with him. I think when it comes to single target bosses that aren't immune to freeze, he is like the number one. He is so good at freezing characters while dealing damage, and he's still fast, and that's basically it. Great damage and good CC against single targets. Now there's a little bit of RNG there, but you roll the dice enough times, it seems to work out pretty much every time. You probably want a little bit of an effect hit chance, because the base hit chance, I think, of the freeze is like 60-ish%. Let's take a look. What is it? The actual is a 55% chance to perform the follow-up and a 65% base chance to freeze. So you might want to increase that a little bit depending on the things, but in the simulated universe or something, right, at 65 is actually pretty high, especially when you have all these buffs going, like you're lowering enemies' chances to resist. So as long as you're attacking, you're usually getting the freeze off, things like that. And honestly, I just think he's the best character in the game. I think he does everything that you want. Now, if I had to get, these are characters right here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These are the characters I don't have experience with. I am going to put them where I think that they're gonna go once I get a chance to use them. I think she is going to be A tier as a battery. I'm just going to put them all on the right side here to keep them separate. She is a good energy battery. Seems like a great support unit. Seems like an easy A tier. Probably one of the better ones. I think Clara is also an A tier. I think she just brings something unique to the table with being able to counter. I think she might be a little bit narrow, but being able to have, I think she's going to be insane for the simulated universe. Maybe outside of the simulated universe, not quite as good. But I think because of how good she could be with all the follow-up attack synergy that there is in there, I think she could be one of the best units for that. I'm going to put, I don't think I could put you below A tier just because of you being probably a better version of the Trailblazer Traveler. But I'm not entirely sure, honestly. Himiko, I am going to put in B tier. I understand that I hear that she's really good, but she falls off, is my understanding. I could be wrong. It might be wrong to put any 5-star below like a 4-star, right? Like she might just be straight up better than Asta. But this is kind of where I feel she belongs for now. And then finally, Sampo. I think Sampo, I romanticize him. He's the one character I want more than any other character in the game because I love damage over time. He does wind shear. He does damage over time. I think he's an A tier character. That's where I expect he will be. I don't think he's going to be like S tier. But I think I'm going to end up putting him in A tier once I get him, but we'll know. These are these are the characters I don't have experience with. So these are ones that I'm definitely less strong on overall. But that's going to be it for the video today. It was a long one, but there's a lot of characters. I will update this as we continue on. Let me know where I'm right. Well, let me know where you think that I'm right. Let me know where you think that I'm wrong. And until then, Purplatypus is Purplatypus. I'll see you in the next one. Peace out, friends.